He was the drug lord whose murderous campaign of narcoterrorism helped transform his native Colombia into the murder capital of the world. Thousands lost their lives during Pablo Escobar's reign at the top of the infamous Medellín cartel, a powerful drug-trafficking ring which at its peak brought in more than $60 million per day and supplied an estimated 80% of all cocaine smuggled into the US. We speak to his son, Juan Pablo Escobar, who's published his second book about his father.
Juan Pablo Escobar, bienvenido a Euronews.
Muchas gracias, un placer.
Durante muchos años,
For a long time, you decided to remain silent about Pablo Escobar. In recent years, you've written 2 books and participated in a documentary about your father. Why the need to talk about him now?
I believe it's my right as his son and as his relative, and I have so much information and evidence about his life in the past. It seems to me that the image of Pablo Escobar has been used to tell stories about him that are not true. As his son, it's up to me to assume the role of telling the truth about Pablo Escobar. It's not a truth that benefits me, but on the contrary, it's a truth that makes my father look very bad, even worse than how he is shown in TV series or movies.
De cómo lo muestran en las series de televisión o películas.
Many people considered him a Robin Hood, and many others considered him an unscrupulous drug trafficker. Who was he?
Robin Hood
actually comes from the press. They were the ones who named my father Robin Hood. He undertook social projects that the state ignored. He built houses, hospitals, schools and sports centres which the state never built, and that brought him much sympathy from the social classes who felt most abandoned. It also guaranteed impunity and protection for many years. My father's life is full of contrasts, paradoxes, contradictions. He built sports fields so that young people didn't use drugs, but he financed them with drug money.
Your first book is dedicated to your father for showing you the path that you shouldn't take in life. What memories made you feel that way?
The worst violence imaginable. Even Quentin Tarantino couldn't have imagined as much violence as there was in this family and in the country that was victim to the violence my father caused.
And as a son?
As a son, I have the best memories of him as a father and the worst of his violence. The only thing that those who have written about Pablo Escobar and I agree on is his unconditional love for his family.
Did you ever express your disapproval?
I had him face to face, as I have you, and I told him 1,000 times that I didn't like the bombs he planted, I didn't like that he kidnapped people, that he killed people, because I knew that the violence he was generating always turned against us.
3 years after the publication of your first book, do you see any changes? How is the figure of your father perceived?
The imbalance between the truth behind his story and the fiction that people want to sell about my father's life is evident. And they have so much more success by a single ingredient, and that is just the glorification. I know that I would go from selling thousands to millions of books if I dedicated myself to making an ode to my father, but I can't really stop people telling stories about him because I tell the same stories. But I think the difference between the way I tell them and the way others do is summarized in a letter I received recently when I was presenting my second book in Argentina. A 13-year-old boy gave me a closed envelope and told me that he had known who my father was since he was 8. He said, "I know who your dad was because my grandmother told me about it, and I was interested in the movies, the TV series and everything, and I've always wanted to be Pablo Escobar, until I read your book. Now I want to be a journalist."
What would you say to those young people who've idolized your father and who want to be Pablo Escobar?
Well, I would invite them to become aware of the true story of Pablo Escobar. It's not that glorified, glamorous version you see on the TV series about him. It's just, I wonder what is the point in owning a mansion if you do not have anyone at home waiting for you. I was hiding with my father and we were surrounded by millions of dollars, but we were starving. Money is supposed to take away your hunger. To us, money brought us hunger, brought us death, brought us violence, the disappearance of loved ones. A lot of violence that never really ended. I would not recommend anyone to enter that world because I do not know any retired drug traffickers.
More than 20 years after Pablo Escobar's death, cocaine production and consumption is increasing. What's failing in the fight against drugs?
The fight against drugs has been lost for decades. It's lost because clearly the dirty play of prohibition is the best propaganda to incite the consumption of these illicit drugs. And it's a big business to forbid. The powerful benefit the most from prohibition, the Americans. Why do they entertain us with small scandals around the world and in Latin America, but they don't tell us what I reveal in my new book about my father's connections with the CIA and the DEA, which he used to traffic drugs?
Do you believe that drug trafficking and coca cultivation threaten peacemaking in Colombia?
As long as there is prohibition in my country, there will be war. And in any country. It is the main cause of violence. I believe it's time for the world to begin considering the possibility of declaring peace with drugs. This won't be solved with machine guns because the ones with the largest machine guns are the drug dealers.
Through education mainly.
Education is the most powerful weapon you can find to tackle the drug problem. I can't imagine a child being more exposed to drugs, to substance abuse, than I was in the 80s. My father educated me so well on that subject that I never dared to try marijuana until I was 28 years old.
For years, you refused to be a father because it seemed selfish to you. What will you tell your son about his grandfather?
Since he was 2, I began to tell him who Pablo Escobar is. Obviously, I'm not going to start telling him what prohibition or the drug trade is, but he's already learned that his grandfather is Pablo Escobar, and my commitment is to raise him with respect and love. Because I know that it would be exclusively what my father would give him if he were alive. And of course, he will know 100% of the crimes committed by his grandfather, so that the day he has the chance to be the next Pablo Escobar, he has enough elements to choose a different path.
Muchas gracias por habernos concedido esta entrevista.
Al contrario, gracias a ti.